Welcome. Welcome to Wharton Moneyball. Welcome to a full hour of sports analytics here on the Wharton Podcast Network. Cade Massey hosting this week, along with the whole team. Delighted to have everybody in here. Eric Bradlow's in here from Points Northeast. Shane, Center City, Philadelphia. Adi Wyner, Wharton Campus West, Wharton, San Francisco. If you can just see overshot Adi's left shoulder, the Bay Bridge, spectacular real estate we've had the privilege of leasing for a few years now. Adi's out there doing some teaching on behalf of Wharton, managing to find time for us. We're going to run our regular format this week. We're going to have a guest here in the first half hour. You might, if you're on video, guess who that guest is. We'll have open lines in the second half of the show. Got a few topics queued up. We have as our guest a frequent guest, a multi-time guest over many years now. Dean Oliver is with us. Dean is a data scientist with ESPN. He has had a role like that off and on over the years. He is one of the real pioneers. I would say one of the, 2 or 3 top pioneers of basketball analytics. It wasn't that long ago we had a guest on here making the case for Dean in the Basketball Hall of Fame. Maybe we will take up that. We are happy to take up that cause. Maybe we will see that cause succeed over the years. Dean has worked for basketball organizations. He was actually a bench coach for the Wizards at one point. He's kind of done it all. He's, for those of you who've listened over the years, know he actually is involved across a lot of ESPN's metrics, including the creation of FPI, which is one of the best public numbers out there, has been from the beginning. But he mainly focuses on basketball. His most recent book, Basketball Beyond Paper, is a sequel of sorts to his path-breaking Basketball on Paper. So it's a great way to dive into more of Dean's work if you'd like. Dean, always glad to see you. Thanks for coming in.
Good to be here. I listen to you guys pretty much weekly, so it's actually interesting to see you all in person. Since I listen, I don't usually watch it. Wow. Okay.
Well, we've been at conferences together. You've taught for Adi. You've been around. We really appreciate your contributions in multiple forms. But we had you scheduled this week, and we thought we were going to talk. Well, here's some Jaylen Brown business to talk about. That'll be fun. But we got even bigger news in the meantime. So let's just jump straight to it. LeBron James made his decision, and he chose our Philadelphia 76ers. They're a little bit less ours than there used to be. They're still owned by Wharton alumni, but our friend Daryl Morey's not running them anymore. LeBron to the Sixers. Let me just note that your tweet, did it stick in our rundown? Your tweet shortly after the decision was merely usages last year. And then you run down 5 current Philadelphia 76ers. They played for different teams last year. Usages last year, LeBron, 27%, Maxey, 29%, Edgecombe, 19%, Brown, 35%, Embiid, 32%. And because you're an analytics guy, you sum those up to the total of 142. So what is your perspective, Dean Oliver?
This is going to be a big experiment. There to put so many guys together who have that had the ball, taken a lot of shots, committed the turnover, made the passes, putting them all on the floor at the same time together is, there have been times it's been done, but it's not a common thing. That's for sure. Of course, they're not going to be on the floor the whole time. And so at the end of the season, you're not going to see each of that add up to 142, but it's also not going to add up to 100 either. It's going to add up to probably in the 110 range or so, because you'll stagger who's on the floor, and they'll pick up more usage when they're out there on the floor with the bench. So you'll see it, but the tweet was very simple because it's conveying this question to the coaching staff. How are you going to distribute the shots and the ball handling and all of that's out there? It's not saying that they're going to maintain it. In fact, obviously they're constrained to not maintain it. So yeah, it's hopefully that's exactly
at a high level. Is it a bigger challenge managing egos, or is it bigger challenge managing the way the guys play the game? Like guys who are accustomed to being on ball are going to spend more time off ball. Are those equal? Is one of those more important? What's your thinking?
They kind of feed back into each other at times. What you hope is that the egos for the players that are out there, they're confident enough in who they are that they don't mind kind of taking a back seat at times. I don't know these players personally myself, so I don't know how those egos are going to be. But managing the play style it's going to be a blend of Nick Nurse, and he has his own style, and these guys. And I think what they say about a lot of coaches when you have a lot of talent is you kind of want to rule the balls out there and just let them see how they're going to do it on their own, and then the coach kind of tweaks it because you want them to like each other. You want them to kind of have evolve a natural way.
Mm-hmm. That's super interesting. I hadn't thought about it in quite that way. Figure out what's natural for them, and you might not be able to predict it. I mean, guys do play with each other all the time, pick up at higher levels, so they figure out how to defer and when not to defer. Shane, I think, was going to jump in.
Well, I just want to kind of point out, I mean, I don't follow basketball nearly as closely as the rest of you, but I kind of feel like a previous time that the same kind of discussion of sharing ego and also like just sharing the rock came up in our show was when Durant went to Golden State. I think there was a situation too where I remember us discussing where how are we going to actually who's actually going to be able to hold the ball type of thing. So that I guess one can look back on as a success story. I'm sure there's a lot of other ones. Do you kind of feel like that is actually a good analog to this situation, or is each one of these cases so idiosyncratic you can't really learn much from like something like that?
But by the way, just note Bob Myers is involved with both of those.
Yes, yeah. That one was a little bit different. In Golden State's case, it was pretty clear that Steph was the man. I mean, Draymond Green is not a big possession user. He's a big part of their defense, but he's not going to be a big part of their offense. He's going to facilitate. That was very clear. He could facilitate without taking a whole lot of shots. Klay Thompson was someone who played off the ball. Golden State was a little bit different. I think some of these other potential super teams that people have talked about. So you had Kevin Durant, you had Kyrie Irving, you had James Harden, you had that team, you had the Phoenix team when they got Bradley Beal and Devin Booker and Kevin Durant. So Kevin Durant's in a lot of these, crazy enough, and they don't necessarily work. And Kevin Durant is pretty moldable. It's interesting. I think that was kind of one of the reasons that they did it is like Kevin Durant's willing to take the right shot. He was a hero on America, Team USA, and the Olympics and everything because he could play with great players really well. That doesn't mean it's going to work for the teams that he did join, those super teams. And I think you're looking at this Philadelphia team. I think they're looking at it hopefully from this perspective that maybe it'll be like Team USA, that all of these guys can just play together like they do on Team USA. And it takes a few weeks for sure.
What are the odds saying right now? Are they genuinely thought to be a contending title contender?
If I recall, they're third behind the two teams in the West, OKC and San Antonio.
Okay.
But it's like plus 900, if I recall.
Yeah,
so they're not like
plus
heavy
900.
favorites. Yeah, so they're not.
Nick's not in the top three. Very interesting.
Yeah, I think they may be tied. I think they may be plus 900, 950 or something like that. It's really close.
So let me. Oh, sorry. Go ahead,
Eric. Go ahead, please.
I was going to ask you, Dean. So, a couple things. One is people have said for the last 20 years that the real LeBron is a pass first guy. So we're going to find that out, right? I mean, we're going to find out if point guard LeBron, because by the way, the article that I read today, statement by LeBron says he plans on playing point forward. He wants the ball in his hands. They're going to have Maxey off the ball. They're going to have Jaylen Brown off the ball. So number one, do you believe that point guard LeBron is the true LeBron? And number two, my major concern, because I've seen the Sixers disastrous at this over the last 10 years, which of these guys is getting the ball at the end of the game?
Yeah, you're getting at something that is very important. So how are these guys going to handle the ball? I tend to agree that LeBron is the best decision maker of the whole group. He doesn't have tunnel vision. He does know how to create for other people, but part of what his mechanism was for creating shots for other players was that he himself was a shooting threat. And he's not as quick as he used to be. He's not as able to finish around the rim. He was maybe the best finisher at the rim of anybody who didn't just play center and had dunks every time. He's not going to have that anymore, but he is still, I think, young enough at 41, crazy enough, to be able to create some advantages. I don't know if I doubt he's going to be sitting in the post very much and creating from there, but they could experiment that if that's what they will find out. So I can see some of those kind of things happening for sure. I think Maxey probably can make some decisions. What's interesting is, well, you talked about end of the game, who has the ball in their hand. Well, it's also who can make the shot if it's passed to them too. Because if you look at the catch and shoot numbers are pretty good for Maxey. They're pretty good for LeBron actually, but he's not going to be passing and catching and shooting to himself. Someone else has to pass it to him. Someone else has to make that pass. Edgecombe is pretty good, but actually Jaylen Brown is not that great at catch and shoot. Joel Embiid is not that great at catch and shoot. So there's some complex dynamics about how that ball is going to move in critical times and I think regular times.
So
And would
Dean,
you
let me follow up.
sorry,
Can I follow up real quickly on behalf of you, Eric, real quick?
Yeah.
Eric has a big man theory in basketball, which I think goes back to Patrick Ewing and the Knicks, help me, Eric, but well, you go ahead. You give my version of the theory is if your best player is your big man, you're going to lose at critical moments. You can't, you're disadvantaged at the end of game, critical moments, end of game. Do I have that right, Eric?
Yeah, I mean, Dean, my theory is very simple. If your best man is, let's say it's Joel Embiid, if you want to claim that, you trap the ball in the backcourt. So now by the time they get over the line, it's 17 seconds. You front them big man in the post. By the time you weave it around to him, it's 5 seconds, 6 seconds. Now you've got a one-dimensional big man who can only do one or two things. There really aren't many options. So I've always said that having a big man as your best offensive choice at the end of the game is not good. That's always been my theory.
So 2 questions for you, Dean. You know more about basketball than all the rest of us combined and more. So your take on the theory as a standalone, and then to what extent does it apply to the Sixers? Does it differently apply to the Sixers now with currently constituted?
In general versus the Sixers. Okay, in general, I think basketball is a dynamic game. Things have changed a lot. I think, of course, if you go back to the 80s when you had Kareem Abdul-Jabbar scoring on the low post, he was the primary option. They won championships with him doing that. That's going back a ways. I think what happens with basketball, things do kind of come and go. And what we have right now is we have a very well-spaced game. You can't just collapse in the post. Like a guy who does that, you have to stay attached to shooters. So it's very hard to kind of double team him. You can front, but it gets risky to do that now because there is so much spacing. You can't leave that weak side shooter. So it's difficult. Going through Embiid, so Embiid has kind of gravitated a little bit, at least, from kind of the low post a little bit more to the high post too, which is frankly easier to get the ball to him there in a lot of situations too. You're not going to be slowing yourself down. The double team options there get a little bit tricky for a defense. So I would imagine they will do some stuff with him, and they'll do handoffs stuff from him. They'll have pick and rolls up at the top, and he'll catch and shoot, and he'll probably hand it off and have some fakes, handoffs, and go to the rim, that kind of thing. I think that's the middle of the floor is very powerful right now. So you can have a post who is that for Philly. I don't think it's going to be a traditional right on the box offense.
Eric, you began your question. I'll cut you off a minute ago. You've got another question at least.
No, I was going to ask Dean whether he thinks the Sixers are a good enough three-point shooting team to contend in the NBA. I don't consider Jaylen Brown a great three-point shooter. He's adequate. Maxey is slightly above average. Edgecombe, we only have 1 year of data. He seems reasonable, but he's no Steph Curry. No one's Steph Curry, but he's not a great three-point shooter. Embiid is definitely, I mean, he's good enough for a big man that he creates a threat. And, so I don't see the Sixers as a great 3-point shooting team. So does that put them at a major disadvantage?
I think it's going to put them at a minor disadvantage, not a major disadvantage, because they're not terrible. And it is one of those skills. A couple of years ago when I was at Sloan and with Ben Alomar, we actually did a paper kind of looking at how long it takes for players to get familiar with each other in terms of that catch and shoot shot. A lot of those are 3-point shots, and teams do get better. Players get used to where that pass is coming from, speed at which is coming, whether they should be in line with the box at the 3-point line in the corner or a little bit higher. All of these kind of things. There is this familiarity process that improves shooting by quite a bit, several percentage points. So it's not trivial
over the course of a season.
Over the course of a season, what happens? It definitely starts off low when guys haven't played much together, and then it grows over the course of months. And it's an important feature.
Well, let me ask you a related question about concerns. I don't consider LeBron a great defensive player anymore. Jaylen Brown can be a good defensive player if that's the part of the game he decides to focus on. Maxey and Edgecombe are undersized guards now in the NBA. Certainly no one thinks of Tyrese Maxey as the Michael Jordan of defense. Embiid has no lift whatsoever anymore, basically can't get off the ground. Maybe he'll show up healthy this year. Won't this team give up 115 points a game?
I think there is a risk on the defensive side. This is where I can see Nick Nurse pulling his hair out a bit. There's usually an assignment where you have to defend the opponent's best player. And a lot of times you have a wing who's assigned to that point guard who can initiate those actions and make the passes out of that. I don't know who that's exactly going to be. I think Brown can do that for a while. He has done that in the past. Last year, he got away from it because he was the scoring threat for sure. But he's not that guy who that is his personality. That's what he's going into trying this major extension. He's trying to get a major extension. You think he's going to get it just by being that guy?
All right. Adi's got one.
Yeah. So, I mean, actually, that's just to follow up on that. You have a guy like Jaylen Brown. I mean, if you want to push people to give up offense for defense, isn't that something that has to happen? I mean, they get exhausted if they work too hard on defense, and therefore they have to pull back on offense. You can't. It's no such thing as a free lunch. So you have all these stars who's going to play hard on defense, and you wonder whether that's going to be any of these guys. And Jaylen Brown. Yeah, exactly. Who might be the person who's willing to give up? Is it LeBron?
I don't think physically LeBron can do it.
No.
No.
I think he tries. I think when he's motivated, when he gets to the playoffs, he's going to try. But he's not. He was one of the best defenders we ever did see too. But so he's coming down from that peak. When he cares, I think he's still average. But there are significant times when you're watching him and he's not really caring. He is leaking out in hopes of transition and have a bunch of transition guys there. But that's not helping the defense.
Well, it's probably hard to discern not caring from preserving energy, right? At 41, he's got to it's like running a long distance race where you can only set that pace so high if you plan on finishing the race.
By the way, Adi, my thoughts have been to your point, and Dean can comment on this too. It may not be any of the starters. Might be Anthony Simons, might be Dean Wade, might be Kentavious Caldwell-Pope. So actually, some of the players that they've signed this year, forget about LeBron and Jaylen Brown for a second, are more known for not Anthony Simons, but more Dean Wade. No, he's no good at defense. But Dean Wade and certainly Kentavious Caldwell-Pope, that you might have a better defensive team in the second 5 unit than you will with the starting 5 unit.
I always found it very interesting that people don't realize that points saved on defense matter as much as different points earned on offense. I mean, it's symmetric, right?
So I had Kentavious Caldwell-Pope when he was in DC, Good guy, definitely. I enjoyed having him around a lot. He does work. He is a bit older now, though, too. And it's been a few years since he was able to like put all his skills to use on that side of the floor. I hope he still has it because he's someone I can root for. But yeah, okay. So you got Dean Wade, and, and then some question marks.
Dean, let's use Jaylen Brown, the trade, the discussion around the trade to get a window into analytics these days. What was your position on? There was this big brouhaha over whether Brown was overvalued, undervalued by the Celtics when they moved him, and there was all this analytics. Analytics say this, analytics say that. That he's not the big player that you'd think based on his MVPs. Where were you on that debate, and what do we learn about analytics, like the cutting edge of analytics in basketball these days, from that debate?
So let me step back from the question a little bit and just kind of let me say it's the metrics as opposed to analytics, because analytics is this whole process of asking questions of the data and testing it, which can go well beyond how good a player is. And effectively, player metrics are what are being tested here. How good is he? How good will he be?
That's a great refinement, Dean. Thank you.
Yeah, it's relevant because I don't want anybody to look at analytics as only being about player metrics. There is so much more that it does. So with Brown, we had people at ESPN who came out and said this was a terrible trade for the Celtics. I definitely disagreed. I thought Jaylen Brown is a good player, not a great player. He was getting paid like he is getting paid like a great player. And I think that's always a challenge. If you're getting paid like a great player and you only perform at a good player level, that's very risky. And if there is a market out there where you can get a couple first round picks in return, that's not a bad thing. People didn't like the trade because they thought he could get more than those first round picks that they got. That's not what the market said. Okay, so that's kind of the general perspective. Analytically, there are a number of things that Brown didn't do as well as stars. And I always have to couch this argument that way because it sometimes comes out and implies that he's bad. He's not bad.
Yeah.
You have to remember, he's not bad. He tends to turn the ball over a lot. He's not a great shooter. He's an okay shooter. He shot below the league average this year. Even when you account for threes and I did a comparison of him to 33 other high usage guys who basically averaged 33% of the team's possessions or more over the last 5-6 years, I think it was. And among those 33 players, like he was one of the worst shooters. He was one of the worst turnover guys. Yeah, he certainly produced a lot of points. He was actually below average in assists too. So like some of the major stats that you would look at that you would hope be somewhat efficient while he's using all the possessions, he was below average. Now you're comparing it to a lot of great players, but not all those great players made the All-Star game. Not all of those players. Yeah, a lot of them actually didn't make All NBA. So there's all these metrics that you can dive into. The player metrics try to capture a lot of those things, and you try to explain what's in there. And in the end, it said there's just not a lot of components. The major component is he scored a lot of points because he used a lot of possessions.
So, Dean, the Sixers know this. Like, it's not like Bob Myers and they don't have analytics people there. So, like, there's a couple theories, and just tell me. One could be that they don't use metrics in that way. The second could be, well, that was when he was on the team, maybe without Jaylen Brown, or I'm sorry, without Jason Tatum because of injury, or maybe he'll be better with the group of players the Sixers have. Or it could be that's the old Jaylen Brown, but there's going to be, we'll use statistical terms. There's some change point, and there'll be the new Jaylen Brown. What do you think? I mean, you don't know. I don't know. But what do you think they could have been thinking? Because they can I'm sure they did that same type of analysis.
Yeah. What you're doing when you have trades is you're trying also to kind of maximize a window that you may have for winning. And there is definitely a window that's going on here right now in Philadelphia. Joel Embiid is aging. He's aged badly since he was like 18, effectively. But so you have that. Tyrese Maxey is very, very good right now. I think they were looking for a way, like, can we go all in about now? I think that's part of it. Plus, they had, when they made the trade, they were also trading away Paul George, who does get paid a lot too. Not as much, and or I think it's a little bit less, and also for shorter time. But like they're making that decision too, that Paul George can't help them as much as Jaylen Brown in this chase to maximize the window that they have, for sure. And they were looking at these 2 first-round picks, and they have a lot of protection with at least one of them. That, like, okay, that's down the road. We want to win they're probably beyond the window that we are aiming at. So there's a timing aspect to this also.
Dean, the other thing it seems to me that's in here is the all-elusive chemistry and fit. And from a modeling perspective, we're talking about interactions. So it's one thing to value Jaylen from, his personal metrics, but then there's always the questions like, what's his impact on other players? And this is elusive across all of our sports, but I feel like basketball has made more progress than, say, football. You've got fewer free variables to play with. So where is analytics on fit and chemistry and these kinds of interactions that are so hard to get? We think are there and people talk about all the time, but they're hard to model.
We know it's real and you can measure it in extreme situations. Obviously you're not putting 5 centers on the floor because none of them can handle the ball. So you find these occasional situations where, okay, we put the wrong guy that they don't really fit, out there. So you can see it in the extreme cases. When you're actually looking for it in data, it gets much more tricky because you're looking at this interaction term between 2 players. And is it positive? But is it negative?
What's your sense of whether executives, how often is an executive able to suss that out intuitively? Because that's their job. Historically, that was like what they did. It's like judging horse flesh, but also this horse effect on this horse. And this is how you justify, this is the rhetoric, and this is actually some of the thinking on how you justify, like the Ravens paying Roquan Smith to play middle linebacker at a full free agent price at not a very high value position because he's supposed to make everybody else better. And he probably does. But I'm guessing executives get that wrong about as often as they get it right. Have you been around some folks who you think, yeah, they're pretty good at sussing that out? They're better than my model at sussing that out.
I can't say I've seen a situation where they're better at it than models, and I can't say models are very good at it either. What I would say is people are pretty good at observing what is happening, but not necessarily predicting what will happen in this kind of situation too. Is in a case where you're trying to make a trade for a Jaylen Brown, maybe you think he is going to fit. Making that prediction is quite hard. You can look at the data, and we have data. I looked at some of the Jaylen Brown fit / synergy, however you want to call it, label it, with the Boston Celtics. And there was a couple cases where he was negative. I think he hurt Peyton Pritchard's performance, for instance. But there wasn't anything standing out as positive. When he and Jason Tatum played together, there might have been a little bit of negative aspect there too.
Okay.
But not there's this negative side too.
Yeah. That can happen for sure. Yeah.
It's hard to see, and it's easier to see than it is to predict.
So let me ask you a question, Dean. Maybe it's obvious to everybody else on this podcast but me. So am I correct that Jaylen Brown has never played with Tyrese Maxey or VJ Edgecombe or LeBron James or Joel Embiid, right? So normally to measure interaction effects, it might be helpful to have observations of the people actually together. So is this like a characteristics-based approach? Like we describe each player by a set of characteristics and we see what combination of characteristics tend to work well? I just want to make sure we're all talking about how you might actually model interactions like this.
Yes, that is one way to do it. Basically, you have a set of skills, and do they complement each other? We have a decent enough model of basketball where you can put that together. That is one approach that is quite hard. Another approach that is quite hard is basically looking for this interaction term between players, um, looking for, how well they complement each other. Do they play? The classic example, I mean, frankly, was Steph, Clay, and Draymond. Those guys, when they were on the floor together, their individual performance numbers all went up. When any one of them was off, it went down. When
Amazing.
two of the other guys were off, like, it went down even more. So you can look at it those kind of ways. It's again,
So
it's
Dean,
hard
this
to
ties into your saying that you can see it and describe it better than you can predict it, because the prediction is probably going to be based on some feature-based model,
Right.
but the actual thing is going to be an individual thing, and you have to do that. Are they going to have the same features in this system as they did in that system?
Yeah.
Real quickly, last one, just to educate us on basketball. We're always looking to learn a little bit more. You just gave a classic example of a 3-player interaction. Tell us what that means in basketball terms. Why were Steph, Clay, and Draymond creating positive synergies for each other on the court? Give us some of the reasons for that.
Yeah. So the reasons, there was one aspect is the fact that they came together at the right time when the league was not quite ready for the way the Warriors played.
Okay.
Steve Kerr came in 2015, I believe it was, and he let those guys play the way they wanted to play, kind of what we're talking about for the Sixers to experiment with. Like, okay, and they played on the perimeter. They had, in a time where defenses were still protecting the paint first, and some degree still are. These were guys where you have to take care of the perimeter first.
Yeah.
And they ran a ton of stuff. And Draymond Green was totally unselfish for that. He's actually much better at making that pass to the perimeter than he is to making the pass to the interior. Again, so they had a matchup advantage due to the timing of the era of basketball, but they also had this advantage that their two best scorers scored from the perimeter. It was just, that's part of it. The other aspect there was a defensive side too, which is that Draymond Green he is one of the best communicators you will see on the defensive side of the floor. He tells guys where to go. He makes it easier for them. And frankly, the Warriors bought into another aspect that was not totally innovative, but they were ahead of the game on. They would switch, so anybody could guard anybody else. And Draymond was particularly good at calling out switches and helping those guys go where they needed to go.
Dean, let me just build one last question on what Shane's earlier comment was when you were talking about the odds, plus 900. Like, how plausible is it? I'm not asking you to predict necessarily what's going to happen, but how plausible is it that the Sixers, who have now a bunch of players, certainly LeBron, Jaylen Brown coming in, who have never played together, that they're going to be better than the Spurs, OKC, or possibly even the Knicks? Like, I understand people want to say, well, they have a great starting five. I don't know. OKC has more depth and talent than any team. They've got more first-round draft picks coming in. The Knicks just won the title, beat the Spurs. So I'm saying, let me ask it in a very specific way. Let's imagine Eric Bradlow builds a probability model that says the 76ers are the favorites. What would you say is the face validity of that model, given your experience?
I would be highly dubious, highly skeptical. It's you use the word better, and we do have to be careful with the word better here too, because I think if I recall correctly, the Vegas odds actually have the Sixers as the favorite in the East to get to the finals, but actually I think third or fourth best record in the East. So what is better is relevant here. What are they? Everybody's looking at them and saying they're trying to maximize the playoffs. They're willing to, they would just want to make an easy regular season run to get their 50 wins, get the top 4 seed, that kind of thing. But they're going to save it for the playoffs. And that is very tricky to model. Frankly, it's one of the things I'm thinking about on my end a lot. How do we model that one better?
All right, Adi, last word. Got to be quick here.
I'll be very quick here, but my understanding is that NBA teams do not even devote that much time to practicing together. They just play, which would mean that it's compounded, unless I'm kind of wrong on that score. When do they have time for this? These guys are superstars. Do they get together and practice all winter?
So
No.
I can tell you what's going to happen right now in August. So beginning in August, you're going to have all of these guys show up without being required to in Philadelphia, and they're going to play some pickup. There's not going to be like any active coaching going on, and they're going to start feeling each other out at that point for who they are. And then through training camp, you'll get a lot of that time in. And then, once the regular season goes, those games are going to end up acting as a lot of practice to some degree.
All right. That's exciting. Eric, please call your buddies Josh and David, round us up some tickets for those preseason scrimmages. We'd enjoy that. And we'll report back on how that goes, Dean. Thanks for pointing it out to us. Dean Oliver, always a pleasure. You guys track his work down. Most recent book, just out, I think, last fall, Basketball Beyond Paper, a sequel of sorts to his path-breaking Basketball on Paper. Dean doing the good work at ESPN. Always a pleasure. Good luck to you, Dean.
Great seeing you guys.
Great to see you. All right. That has been the first half of this week's Wharton Moneyball. Come back and join us after the break. Welcome to the second half of this week's show. After a full discussion with Dean Oliver, our longtime friend, about basketball, come away smarter about basketball. Dean's always a pleasure to talk to. We're going to dive right in to a little bit of baseball. We have some other topics to cover, but we're going to lose Adi momentarily because he's teaching out on the West Coast. And Adi want to talk Hall of Fame. Eric made his annual family pilgrimage to the Baseball Hall of Fame ceremonies this past weekend, I believe. We got a few texts about it. And Odd, why don't you start us off with whatever you want to know from Eric and his pilgrimage?
Well, I mean, what's interesting, of course, is the hoopla around the Hall of Fame. And why, do you get any sense when you're there of why Baseball Hall of Fame is just so much more of a thing than the other Hall of Fames? That you have people like you doing this, maybe you have people like you in other sports, but it just doesn't feel like it's the same.
Yeah, I mean, to me, it's the history of baseball. And, when you're at the Hall of Fame building itself, that's where Babe Ruth gave his speech. And that's where Ted Williams gave his speech. And that's where Mickey Mantle gave his speech. And that's where Ty Cobb gave his speech. And so the amazing thing is that, you can watch video of each of them giving their speech and you can stand right where they stand. And then now they've moved it about a mile away to the Clark Sports Center. But I don't know another Hall of Fame. Maybe they do. I'm sure they're returning Hall of Famers in other sports. But, when you have Sandy Koufax returning to the Hall of Fame and you're thinking, this guy has been in the Hall of Fame for 54 years. And I'm going to tell you, looking at him, I'm predicting at least another 10. This man looks fantastic. I'm going to tell you, if there's something wrong with Sandy Koufax, he's hiding it extraordinarily well. The other interesting stat, Adi, I know you have to run. So Raleigh Fingers has just came to his 34th consecutive ceremony, which is only second to Bob Feller, who came to 38 consecutive.
Wow.
And Raleigh Fingers is not that old. So, and he looks damn good. So, I think it's those kind of stories. And the wonderful thing about the Hall of Fame is they do such a wonderful job telling the stories of the Hall of Fame. And the woman that's the chairperson of the Hall of Fame, Jane Forbes Clark, grandfather, started the Hall of Fame. So she always gives like a 10-minute speech talking about her grandfather and who started the Hall of Fame and was in, the first class and was inviting them back. It's these stories are just incredible. To me, I think people that lived baseball like you and I do, Adi, look, I love the NFL. I love the NBA, love tennis, golf. Baseball's just different. It's just different. It's different, especially when you're there with your kids. Because, someday, Adi, I assume, I'll be gone, and I hope my kids continue to go to Cooperstown every year.
Well, I'm going to just summarize by saying I think that baseball has a connection to the history, has historical connections much deeper and longer than the sports. It was invented in the mid 19th century, and it's also very deeply tied up to American history. One of the things that I talk about, and when we had Professor Henkin in from Berkeley talking about baseball, sport was only a thing of the upper crust because they're the only ones who had time. Everyone else worked, and there was no time for games. And baseball was brought to the United States as well as soccer to England right around the time where people were starting to have free time.
Yes, Adi,
So
let me
it's
just add one other thing. One other thing they did that was really needed this year. I know you have to run and go teach. You may remember this. This is the 50th anniversary. Since this is the 250th anniversary of America, they celebrated a very interesting thing at the Hall of Fame this year. You probably remember this, Adi. Do you remember when Rick Monday prevented two people that had jumped out of the stands during a Dodger game? They were going to burn a flag on the field.
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah.
And so Rick Monday, who was there, he was there at Cooperstown, celebrated. All the Hall of Famers stood up and cheered him. They showed a video of him grabbing the flag that had been doused in, oil or whatever,
Wow.
lighter fluid. And they made a special deal. It was the 50th anniversary. And Rick Monday, by the way, you may not know, he was the #1 pick in the draft, didn't play for 6 years because he was in the Air Force. So he talked about it. He came up to the podium and said, "You think I was going to let them burn the American flag off the field?" So they even did that right.
Wow.
And also
that's
our
amazing.
buddy who had been on the show, Josh Trowick, the president of the Baseball Hall of Fame and Museum, gives a great speech about the importance of the Hall of Fame. And, it's a museum too. It's the history of the game. So they just do everything. My first cousin who came to us, had never been to the Hall of Fame. Never. He said of all the ceremonies he's ever been to, they did this one right.
Great.
All right, Adi's slipping back to the classroom out in San Francisco in the shadow of the Bay Bridge. Eric, anything else from your notebook about your family trip, your annual family pilgrimage to the Hall of Fame?
I just think what's funny is it's clear to the fans who the first tier, we always talk about this first tier, second tier, third tier. So when they announced the returning Hall of Famers, and by the way, I was so happy that it was the largest returning class in the history of the Hall of Fame. So 60 Hall of Famers were there, 60. That's
Amazing.
a big number, given there's only been 270 players that have ever been there, and 60 were there. All the way from, Sandy Koufax, the oldest, to, if you'd like, the newest, being the 3 new members, but even last year, Ichiro. People literally stand, like when Ken Griffey's announced, people stand and cheer. When, I hate to say it, when Big Papi was announced, people stand and cheer. I'm sorry,
You hate
Shane.
to say it. I mean,
No, I'm saying Derek Jeter, these are Greg Maddux. These are the immortals, 355. And the beautiful thing they do.
So are you putting Big Papi in this upper tier of the Hall of Fame?
No, not that tier. But
you have to norm the applause for the recency.
Yeah,
and if
you
you norm for recency, then you'd get it.
They
I don't think
literally
he was doing that with Jeter, but okay.
They also have a great announcer. The guy, Brian Kenny, who's the lead announcer on the MLB Network, is the MC. And so as each Hall of Famer comes out, besides video on the screen, he gives a 30-second, now coming out is Sandy Koufax, inducted in 1970, blah, 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 blah. And then the whole crowd just rises. And, I hate to say it, but when Alan Trammell's announced, there's nice applause. But I mean, Alan Trammell's not getting the same thing as but then you got, when Rod Carew comes out, George Brett, the Iron Man, Cal Ripken. I mean, it's just an incredible experience. And of course, for me, it reminds me of my dad when we used to go to games. My dad grew up in Philadelphia. My dad used to tell stories. My dad was born in 1920. He said one of the first games he went to, so the Yankees play the A's. Lou Gehrig, Babe Ruth, and Jimmy Fox were on the field. So, I mean, it doesn't get better than that.
I like that you've kind of created this nascent field of Hall of Fame ceremony analytics, where we look at how predictive or how correlated is Hall of Fame kind of tier with applause at the Hall of Fame.
It's entirely possible. We could
record. We talked about some outliers. We've got, at least in your mind, Big Papi, disproportionate applause. He
was always a fan favorite, right? He was a fan favorite. You can find out affection is different from performance on the field. Some guys stand out in that way.
But clearly, there's no doubt Sandy Koufax, they literally just let the applause go for 5 minutes. That was just incredible.
That's great. Good fun. We should know what is different about different sports, and baseball has the corner on history. There's no question about it.
The other thing is also, it makes you reflect on this year's class, which I consider a particularly weak class. But, you did have Jeff Kent. he's got something going for him. He's got the most home runs ever by a second baseman. That's something. You know, you have Andrew Jones. There's only 3 players in Major League history that have 10 Golden Gloves in center field and 400 home runs. So he's one of them, along with Willie Mays and Ken Griffey. That's worth something. And
both of those are both big things you just said.
No. I'm just
are
saying.
notable.
As the Hall of Fame grows, it can only get harder and harder to stand out versus the Hall of Fame.
Yeah.
You're right. But just so you know, next year we're looking, maybe people are saying if he's a first ballot, Buster Posey, and then maybe Chase Utley in his like 8th year. But let me just say, it ain't Murderer's Row going into the Hall of Fame next year.
Okay, let's not move this conversation into next year. I know we're going to have time for forecasting that. I want to go one of 2 directions, and they're both connected in a way. Let's go in the snarky direction. Did y'all notice today was a notable day in college football? This was like the beginning of jersey patches in college football. It's happened. They've had the ability to put jersey patches in college football. I think the restriction is they can have up to 2 sponsors, no more than 4 square inches each, I believe.
What?
The Big 12 announced a deal earlier this summer. The Big 12 got something like $20 million from an outfit called Monster Energy to sponsor every team, all 16 of them in the Big 12. And then
so tacky. Oh my goodness. I mean, we live in a tacky world. That's all right.
That's tacky. That's July. Now we're still in July, aren't we? Just 2 weeks later, big announcement this morning. Ohio State has a deal with, get this, guys, JP Morgan Chase is the patch, has a deal for $16 million, all 36 varsity sports at Ohio State, with the possible add-ons like NIL, internships, all that kind of stuff. So it's one team, $16 million, all programs.
So, Kate, can I be, just for a second, let me be a quantitative marketing scholar, which is what I do in my daytime job. Is this an opportunity to start measuring the effectiveness of sponsorship? Because in theory, we will have, like, JP Morgan Chase is at Ohio State. We could measure the DMA in the area. We could see if there's local effects of having those patches. We could try to see if distance from Ohio State matters.
Yeah.
We could start to see, I'll make it up. Texas has, I'm making this up entirely, has American Express, but this team has Ohio State has this. I think there will be a large number of academic quantitative marketing scholars studying patches and their impact on awareness, sales, and all kinds of
precisely because you get this. But hold on, Shane, because you get this geographic and time varying introduction. So it's like exactly what you want.
Right. Look, we've talked about this a lot. You need variation. This is exactly the kind of. Now, let me just comment. It's probably not random variation because
not perfectly.
JP Morgan Chase isn't randomly selecting teams, but at least it's variation.
Yeah. Shane, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Well, I was just saying, I would just kind of go glibly that as the amount of marketing we're exposed to is increasing geometrically, the number of marketing scholars we need is also increasing geometrically. So I guess there's some good news in all that there.
So scholar per exposure.
I was interesting. Like I've watched like a lot of soccer out with people over the last, couple months. And it's always fascinating to me that the jerseys that when you buy like a jersey for a soccer team, like it comes with like whatever ad the athletes has to wear. Like the jersey that you're buying is also like, so you're purchasing this $100 jersey that is also an ad for some random company, like, like an airline or something like that. It's just so odd to me. But
so we are squarely. That's what college football. Just every corner is being monetized. But so just to add a little flavor to this story, Ohio State now announces this sometime this morning. Notre Dame announced it like 2 hours later. Notre Dame patch SoFi. I think it's $20 million. $20 million, no, it's 18 to 20, something like that. So they topped Ohio State. Ohio State had the top number for like 90 minutes. And then Notre Dame comes in, SoFi, and pricelessly and predictably, there was somebody on Twitter as soon as Ohio State announced that said, "Oh, friggin' Buckeyes selling out. Notre Dame would never do that." And then it didn't take an hour for that to be proven.
Yeah.
Anyway, it's notable. It is. I mean, it's college athletics, but it's also business. And when you start throwing in J.P. Morgan, you're talking about, they hire a bunch of our students, and that's squarely our world. And it's like, that's an interesting intersection. It's just continuing to drive these things together. Okay, that was one possible connection to Hall of Fame, and that it's the opposite of cherishing your history and keeping it pristine like baseball does. But in the direction of Hall of Fame, this is not a novel topic now. 2 days after Jackson Koiven won the PGA, the 3M tournament this weekend, in his third start ever, he's just blown up in the last few days. This guy, I've named this guy to y'all a couple times over the last couple of years because
and who came in second again, Cade?
Yeah, Scotty Scheffler came in second again.
Very
so this is Eric's hypothesis that Scotty's now a number two guy, runner-up guy. So Jackson Koiven,
I'll bet every week on Scotty Scheffler.
Yeah, we're gonna. That's not the last time we hear that one.
Exactly second, Shane. Not win, place, or show. Exactly
That's where
second.
you get the real. That's where you've got. You're a precise guy.
Shane. Everybody's getting the big story wrong, and people think it's Jackson Koiven. No, it's Scotty Scheffler coming in second again. That's the big story.
5 seconds this year. Let's see you do that.
So just a couple things. We're 48 hours late on this, but Koiven was one of the biggest amateurs we've ever had. He helped Auburn win, I think, 2 titles. And certainly this past year, he won a bunch of tournament titles himself as an individual. He earned enough points. The PGA has this system where if you win enough, do well enough as an amateur, you can earn points and qualify. And it usually takes, a lot of years to do that. He earned them by the end of his sophomore year. He could have turned pro after his sophomore year. He declined. He didn't think he was mature enough yet in whatever way. Went back to Auburn his junior year, won the national championship. He qualified again. I think he would have qualified based on just those 12 months worth of points. Just his junior year, he qualified to go so now he has twice as many points as he needed. He came on third start, wins this thing going away, won it going away. Strong field. Multiple major winners. People apparently, according to Data Golf has been keeping amateur rankings since 2010. So whatever that is, 16, 17 years worth of amateur rankings. And he has the highest ranking ever among amateurs. He's no longer an amateur, but when he left amateurness, the next 2 guys were Jordan Spieth and John Rahm.
They've done okay.
So coming out of with the history they had at that point in their career, this guy is in that territory and even slightly ahead of that territory. So big name to keep track of.
So I assume though we all agree, like if we were going to put a confidence interval on this guy on any reasonable thing you might want to predict, like total PGA wins or majors, you just have to put you would put it obviously maybe considerably higher than the average person that joins the PGA Tour, but it would have to be extraordinarily wide, right? I mean, this guy may never win a major. It's just hard to know.
It's a great point. I mean, who foolishly would try to forecast the majors of any individual? Who would do that? Who would take up that exercise? That's the kind of thing we do all the time. And Eric is saying the following. Eric's saying, yeah, this guy's got a higher mean than the typical amateur that goes pro, but you still don't know. Even with the higher mean, you're just like wildly uncertain what he's going to actually do. And that's a very fair point.
Yep.
This kind of makes me wonder whether what the correlation is between kind of amateur rankings in golf and how people actually do in their career. I mean, we obviously ruminate on this like every week in football, right? And like how predictive the draft is from the from actual NFL performance. There you've got the additional confounded factor of the person drafted goes to a team, which can be like, that's essentially added randomness. Essentially, in golf, maybe you don't have that added randomness. It stays an individual thing.
That's right.
And so maybe the correlation is tighter.
And even the competition in some cases is identical. Like you see amateurs play in professional fields. I had a bit of this conversation with Rufus, our friend and my collaborator, former student Rufus Peabody, a golf analyst and bettor, with the British Open this year. I was asking him, this was just kind of text and on the passing, so I didn't get details, but like, how much trouble do you have forecasting amateurs when they haven't played a lot? Like he's gonna run numbers on everybody in the field. He's got to run numbers on an amateur. He was not fussed by it at all. It's like, I got data on those guys.
Yeah, I have some numbers here. So here we go. So according to Golf Week, there's a correlation of about 0.45 between amateur rankings and professional earnings and wins. According to the World Amateur Golf Ranking, WAGR, the correlation's about 0.35. And according to strokes gained data, it's about 0.25. So people have done this analysis where they've taken amateur rankings and measured in certain ways and correlated it with certain outcomes: wins, strokes gained, earnings.
Eric, what was that? The first one you said was 0.45. What exactly was being correlated with the 0.45? I'm guessing that's higher than Shane would have thought. It's higher than I would have thought. 0.45 is a serious correlation.
I think
so
what
was it?
Amateur rankings and like earnings and wins.
Like when they end their amateur, their peak, when they leave amateur status,
Correct.
what was their ranking? And then let's look at their career.
Yeah.
Okay, Shane, how does 0.45 sound to you?
I mean, that sounds high. I mean, certainly NFL
Way high.
would be way lower, right? I mean, so no, I mean that, I mean, if you really wanted to kind of like go down this rabbit hole, you just want to start looking at that top end and all this type of stuff. But I think that's super interesting, and that is kind of that's certainly high relative to
like if it was, let's say it was a third just for a second, that would imply that if you just did a simple regression, you'd have an R squared of 0.1. And it probably means also, if you included a bunch of other variables in there, its partial correlation is going to be considerably lower because there's all kinds of other things in there. But I agree with you. That number's way high. No way. I just telling you.
I'm not saying no way. I'm not saying.
I was saying, like, I mean, whether or not it's like the real number or whatever like that, it's a suitably high number that, like, I consider there now empirical support to my hypothesis that the correlation is higher in like.
Yeah, I mean, it's a different exercise, but than college football. It's individual play, and they actually see them play on the exact same field sometimes.
No interaction effects of team, all that type of stuff.
Yeah, all that stuff. That's right. Okay, guys, let's hit a little bit of baseball before we go. I see that someone's talking about Misereski for Cy Young, but we had a text thread a couple of days ago where one of y'all told me that Misereski had like 12 Ks in 5 innings or something.
Did.
Yeah.
And what happened with that? That's ridiculous. What happened next?
I mean, his strikeout rate is insane. Like, he's kind of, in my mind, the Cy Young's right now kind of a 2-horse race between Misereski and Sanchez. Sanchez has actually, pitched more innings, but Misereski is like this, just an insanely high strikeout rate for what he's doing right now. He's super impressive.
Tell me something about Sanchez.
Well, I mean, he had that scoreless inning streak.
No, I need more basics than that. Where does he play? Where did he come from? What's going on?
Well, Chris, he's a Phillies pitcher.
Sorry, guys.
No, I mean,
Sanchez is that kid who he had all those scoreless innings.
He did.
Yeah. That guy. Yeah.
But I will say he then got rocked in the All-Star game, and his first start after the All-Star game has not been particularly good. Let me just comment. So, but he had a tremendous first half of the season. But let's one or two starts. I'm just saying, let's hope he has a good second half of the season.
Yeah, no, I mean, both of them, I would be surprised. You'd have to expect a lot of regression to the mean for both of them because multiplying up either their two first half performances over a whole season would, I think, come close to historical, not just be kind of a Cy Young type season.
Well, this is an Adi question that he could answer off the top of his head, I suspect. But how much persistence do we see across starts for pitchers within a season? Persistence.
Yeah.
And that's like it's a version of Eric's momentum. Eric's always interested in momentum. This is related. We talk about golf having quite a bit of, medium term momentum. What do we see in baseball pitching?
I don't want to speak for Adi, but my recollection of what he would say, I think, is that there's a lot of variation, like, that even the great pitchers bounce around quite a bit. you know, and that, you know, every great pitcher has starts in a year like the one Sanchez just had. I mean, if you start stacking up those bad starts or less excellent starts, then we'll start kind of moving, I think, our image of his actual mean.
Yeah.
But like, you know, I think it's, you know, what the kind of, there is a lot of variation start to start.
Yeah, guys, I have to run, but I remember the context by which Adi brought this up. You remember, Kay, the discussion was this idea of the second and third time through the lineup. And what Adi pointed out was,
well, hold on, make that observation. The claim was that pitchers are worse on the third time through. Once a batter's seen a pitcher 3 times, they are more effective against them. And Adi kind of poo-pooed that.
He not only poo-pooed that, but what he said is this high level of inter-game variation, which Shane correctly points it out. He said, yeah, but by the time someone's pitched a couple innings, you could tell whether this is the good hump or the bad hump.
That's
so,
right.
you know, it's not like, so once you've observed somebody for a small number of innings, why are you know, you probably have a high chance that this is one of their good days. That was his point.
You know, one of the great things about that from a behavioral perspective, unless you appreciate the intra-player, inter-game variation, you're going to underreact to those early draws.
Exactly.
If you carry in your head there is this inter-game variation, intra-player, inter-game variation, then you're much more quick to react when you get that sample. But people don't carry around a lot of variance in their priors, and so they're not going to update appropriately. Okay, Eric's going to step away, so why don't we just wrap here? We had a long session with Dean. We'll let this one go. That is the whole show for Eric Bradlow, for Adi Wyner, who was here for the most of the show, but not all the way, for Shane Jensen, for our boss lady, Dee Patel, our producer, Jacob Grodnick, for all of you guys, the listeners. Thanks for being here. Come back and join us next time. Between now and then, enjoy your sports.